How are you? How are you? Dot Tone Dan. Dot Tone Designs VIPs on Facebook. I wanted to run past this as another quick little tutorial, mostly geared toward the new people who are trying to print out films and understand all of this nonsense. So this is a PSD file, customer provided PSD file. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was the document size. So when you go to under image in Photoshop, go to image size, and it tells you what the document size is. This is provided at 13 by 19 at 300 resolution. Theoretically, what most people tell you, 300 resolution is a good file resolution for Photoshop documents. That is, if you are printing full color images to full color digital printers. So for a digital file in full color, it's great. And it is a usable file for color separations in Photoshop also, but that's not really what we're talking about here. Separations, individual colors, one color on up to 6, 8, 12, whatever press you have. Those are all individual separations. When you need to pull those out, break them apart into the 6 colors or whatever, the 300 has been working fine, but the 600 works better. And it works better more precisely for color separation, color pulls, because the detail that you're pulling is all that much smaller, more minute. So it presents smoother color separations. In addition to that, when you're printing solid colors like this type that you see here, it is very important for resolution, and you really want a higher resolution. Similar to the idea of when you don't have a rip and you're trying to do separations with halftones in them in Photoshop, you want to output at a 600 dpi, ppi file resolution. PPI is pixels per inch. DPI is dots per inch, which pertains to how you would call out for the resolution of your printer. So if you're printing film and you got like an Epson 1430, well, that's a 600 DPI printer. It's economical, bottom of the line kind of film printer, and a lot of people have them, but they've discontinued. So you need to find another source, and a lot of those printers are still 600 DPI printers. 1200 DPI printers are going to be better, so if you can find that, get that, if you can afford it. But back to the color separation part. So resolution is important, right? 600 PPI is important. You don't need to mess with changing this at this stage while working in the file, but when you go to print films, you want a solid, sharp, crisp line at 600 resolution, and I'll show you why. I'll show you why in a second, but first let me get back to document size. So I'm going to cancel that. This again was provided to me at 13 by 19, which is great, right? That's my film size, but I don't need the document, the negative white space out here, 13 by 19 size. So why is that? Because of a couple reasons. One is file size. You don't need all this out here. And the other is rip time. So depending on your rip, if you're printing a film, rip time is not all that important, but the printing time is. So if it's reading this whole document, and you're printing to a direct-to-screen machine, for example, it's reading all this math. This empty space is math. there's nothing in it, but there's still math there. It's got to plot out that actual dimension. So I like to crop that booger. Using the crop tool up here, I just drag straight up, right? Hold down the Option key and I can drag on both sides, and I drag it into the center. And luckily this was already centered. When I come into layers, because that's where I'm at right now, working in layers, so that's just a solid white background, black type. When I'm working in layers, I can select, holding down the Command or Control key, I can hold that down and then click on that layer, and that selects every pixel that's in that layer. So if I happen to have a little pixel hanging out there in gray, and I select, what's actually selecting this also, which I don't want to do in this case, but so just to give you an idea. So I'm selecting every pixel, and I am going to then click on the crop tool. Now I like to expand my selection out here a little bit. So I have a shortcut key. I'll use my expand, and I believe that's under select, modify, expand. Let's say 5 pixels. I just want to get out away from the artwork a little bit. And then I crop, okay? Click enter. And so what that's doing is it's cutting close to my artwork. It gives me the actual dimensions. So I want to go to canvas size, and this is going back to printing direct to screen. So I want to put in, because it's a Photoshop file, I want to put an extra 2 inches at the top. So I put my anchor point down here at the bottom. This is going to give me it's adding the space to the top. So I'm at 6, 7, 8, and then that gives me 2 inches at the top. Why did I do that? So for printing direct to screen, you have to lock in it prints in you load the frame in, and it has to print the image. It's all math and plotted, so it has to print the image in the exact place that you told it that you want it to go. So if this was the left chest, it would land over here, for example. But by default, the machines will center it and they'll push it up to the top. So this, if I did not give any space and I just cropped it, down to the actual size of the art, it would then push it up here in the template, or in the by going to the direct-to-screen machine. So I give it the 2 inches space at the top there. Now, because I have this space in my file, it's going to print in the correct location. The width here doesn't matter. It's always going to center. And so it's reading this space out here as my document on the edge. So as long as I have those 2 inches in there, I know it's landing in the correct location. That 2 inches is accounting for 4 inches from the palette to the outer edge of the frame, with a total of 6, and typically 6 inches from the edge of your screen frame into your image area is where your standard print is going to land, about 6 inches down. That puts it a couple inches below the collar, for example. But back to this. I know I'm jumping around a little bit, so I apologize, because it does pertain to 2 different aspects. There's film printing and then direct-to-screen machine printing. In this, now that I've got my positioning correct, I want to, well, let me go back to the rip time. If it was at 13 by 19, for example, that full-size document, it's got to read all that empty space down at the bottom. And it really pertains into the director's screen machines because there's rip time and then there's print time. So if there's empty space down here, your printer starts out here and it's reading all this, and then it moves up and then starts to print your image. So that's wasted time down here and wasted document size, especially if you're archiving and saving all of your ripped files. So back to film printing. This I want to make a selection of, again, holding down the command or control key, clicking on that channel, that layer, and now I'm clicking on to the channels window. And I do this in here. I'm going to fill this selection. I created, sorry if I didn't tell you, but clicking on here is going to give me a new channel, because these are channels, is RGB, but it pertains to RGB full color. Like what makes up this black in here, can't see it because I don't have it activated. But what makes up this black is here, and here is the RGB makeup. That's because the file mode is still in RGB. And same with CMYK, it would be 4 channels if I changed it to CMYK. But I don't want that because I'm working with 4 different channels in there. So I want to work with 1, and then I'm going to fill that with black in the foreground. And at print size, that looks, or when you view down, it looks pretty decent and ready to go. But remember, this is a raster image. So as I blow up on this and I look at the edges, they're all fuzzy. So there's stuff I got to do to clean this up. When you get a PSD file and you're working in Photoshop, you want to make sure you blow up on it and see what you're dealing with. And then I also have my info window out here, and so that tells me, like, when I made a selection and filled it into this channel, I filled it actually with black, solid black, because let me edit that just a little bit. And so it looks black, but if when I read it with my info window, I can read it says 95%. All right, and this is just where I'm moving around the X and the Y, and that's 95% solid right there. So why does that matter? This is why you get these questions from people sometimes, because I just undid that. That's why I'm doing this again. It looks black, looks good on screen, ready to print. Then when you go to bitmap, and I'm pretending I'm ripping it here, I'm just pretending that I'm ripping, because some people do this method for printing out halftones. Same process right here. The resolution 600. Even though I started out at 3, I want to output at 6. Halftone screen, and then 55 is a common halftone line count. 22.5 angle and elliptical dot. So when you click OK, I got all these halftones where I wanted solid. I don't want halftones in there, right? Same for the edges on this type. Very crappy. This is what I talk about, crisp and clean. This is not crisp and clean. I went to curves real quick. A way to fix this is in curves, and you take this little shadow dot. Shadow, you see the clipping, it says show clipping. Right next to there is midtone, highlight, shadow. And so this line here is where everything starts to be super bright white. And then this line is the shadow, and it's indicating that this is like 89%. If I move it over a little bit, I'm going to burn that into 100%. So pop, pop, and I click on that, and it changes a little bit. So you see how that drug over? That's my pigment. Sometimes this will reverse. That's what I needed to do. I usually work this way. So that'll make everything solid black. You don't need to go way over here, but just to this line right here, that's where it begins. Pop. And then when you read it, the info, it's solid black. But that still makes my type out here blurry. This happens from people that will take one image, let's say off the internet or something, and it'll pop it in to a Photoshop document, and then when they create new, they may give it a resolution of, let's make this 13 by 19, and they'll say, oh, I want a 300 resolution. That's a good resolution to work. And then they take their image and they drag it into here, like pretty much like that, right? So, and then they put it into there, and they'll think, well, the resolution was great, so yeah. But then again, when you blow up on it, you still got these fuzzy edges. So, and then this also happens when you scale images. When you take something and you scale it up or down, you're resizing it in pixels. So there's a thing going on called interpolation. And that interpolation has to blend those pixels from, let's say, this square dot. Let me create another one. From, let's say, that square dot over to another one, and I don't know, let's go from this point to this point. And what it has to do is it has to create these other shades within the space. So if this was 150 pixels, but now it's 300 pixels, it has to create pixel space in between there. And it can't scale it to that resolution without filling that with color data. For the lack of a better scientific explanation. But I hope that helps explain that a little bit. So when you add pixel data, you are filling in the spaces, and that's what causes this blur. So you have a starting point out here, and your original type may have been in here, and so it has to create those steps in there, and that's that scaling process, and that is interpolation, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So how do you handle that? Well, in channels, that's another reason why I like to work in channels. I can adjust this using levels. Slide it over. I want to fill it in a little bit, and then I want to burn it out. Burn it. When I say burn, I'm eating away at those edges a little. Blow up on it, and you can see that a little bit better. Eat away. Fill it in. And I'm trying to meet it in the middle somewhere to where it looks pretty decent. And I'll tell you why. Because you can eat away at this and it just becomes too thin and starts to look choppy. You see these jumps in here? So a way to not have those major jumps is to try and keep it a little smooth and eat away at the blended edges also. And then that works out much better. Now I can actually print this. Now for me, there's a couple little hiccups in here. One is like just these little bumps along the edge. And at this resolution, I'm using my pencil tool, sorry. And because that's not fuzzy, because if I use my airbrush tool, you see, even though I have a smaller size, it's still got that pixelated fuzzy edge to it. That's what the airbrush tool does. Pencil tool is black and white. And you can increase the size of your brush, but it's still at the resolution. And this is what freaks people out about printing to film. My file is 300 resolution, see? But if it was 600 resolution, it would be much smaller than that. Let's go ahead and change it. Image size, 600. Now, you see the dimensions changed. So my preview changed. And you see how choppy that was right there. And I'm going to use the pencil tool. And I went back to the same brush, but you see it's much smaller now because of the resolution of the document. And now this is much smaller. It's tighter, smaller pixels. The resolution is better. So now I can come in and I could have done this part with the lower resolution also, but I just wanted to show you the difference. You know, that's a line, a single point line at 600, and that's going to be a single point line at 300. That's resolution. Again, I undid all that, so I'm just doing this over again. Again, that's printable. These little things here, when you make your adjustments with levels and curves, remember it's kind of averaging space, deciding whether it's going to be solid black or solid white. So when you do that, you're going to have the edges a little softened and then blurred and hardened. And so if you're anal like me sometimes, you could come in and fix all those like that. I'm just painting with the pen tool at the resolution that I'm working in. And all I'm doing is toggling back and forth with the X key, painting that. See, there's still a little bit of gray data. Where is that in the levels? You see that little point right there? That might be that, or it could be that. Actually, some of these over here that you see, these little points, like when you burn this out and you literally have nothing, and you do it again, you have less and less of these little spots. You don't need to continue to do that. I think this is like the best it's going to get. It's either black or it's white. Yeah, same thing, see? Doesn't matter how many times I do that. It's black or white. So there must have been a little bit of slightly gray data in here. And then I can take my pen tool and paint those in. Now, what I want to say is, you see how I made that nice and perfect? In print on the t-shirt, this would look nice and perfect too. It'll look as good as this. So you don't need to, freak out and make everything super perfect. And I did this here in Photoshop because I didn't want to mess with retyping it, drawing this top logo out here in vector. I could have done that, and it's a pretty easy job, pretty easy font to find. But the artwork was provided to me in Photoshop at a decent size. So I just need to come in real quick, make a few adjustments with the levels, and I got my one color separation ready to print. So then, you add space down here. I go back to the crop tool again, add my space in down at the bottom for maybe a bottom registration point. And then I can come in with the select all, and then go to the transform tool, Command or Control T. And then out on the rulers out here on the side, I can click and drag out and find my center point. And then I click off of the transform tool, deselect. And then I can click on one of my brushes, which I have a registration mark brush saved for Photoshop. And it's pretty big based on the resolution. So with black in the foreground, I just click on the center, bada bang. Use the marquee tool, selection marquee, drag back down, holding the Shift, Option, and Control key. And I'm duplicating. That's how you do that. Duplicate. Shift, Option, you can move it around, give you another one. Shift, Option, Control or Command key, Option, and then you can move it around wherever. But if you hold the Shift key, it locks it into place. See that? So I can drag straight over, one over here as well if I want, and then I can type in my information about the job. And so now I'm getting ready to print the film. So for whatever reason, would not let me delete the RGBs, but I had to go back in and activate that RGB layer and delete it. So I just want to click on delete, get rid of the RGBs, change this to a spot color. It's going to be spot color black, one color black. I like to name the channels. On here, you then, with black in the foreground, you can type out one color black. This is if you're printing to film, and also if you're printing to a direct-to-screen machine. You can put the information in there. But I like to name the channel because if I don't do this part, and even with some shops, they don't use registration marks because they're using the tri-lock. And so it locks it into the same position all the time. Even for registration, some people do still put the registration marks on there,